Hi, Plaster Dragon here. This is my very first YouTube video. I'm more of a lurker than I am a video creator, but it's a Saturday and for some reason I felt the need, so here I am. This is a response to Owchywawas' 5 questions for atheists. Link in the description. I generally don't find such videos very interesting because I typically find that the person asking such questions simply doesn't understand what an evidentiary worldview is, in extension, what atheism is, and how one gets there. I think this set of questions illustrates that, so to that end, let's get Owchywawa his answers. Question number 1. Would any experience cause you to believe in the existence of a God of any form, or would the possibility of mental illness or some kind of delusion prevent you from believing in every case? This question begins with the assumption that personal beliefs are formed entirely based on personal experiences, and that right there is problem number 1. If I roused from my slumber to find Thor floating around my bedroom, threatening to crush me with his hammer unless I professed a belief in him, yeah, I would assume I was dreaming or suffering some sort of mental breakdown. Substituting Jesus for Thor wouldn't change my perspective. While personal experiences necessarily inform belief, a person with an evidentiary worldview recognizes the fallibility of the human brain, and therefore refuses to rely solely on personal experience for the formation of all beliefs, where possible. That said, of course I would believe in God or Wotan or Ganesh if the existence of such creatures could be empirically demonstrated, repeatedly, and confirmed in a manner designed to root out and account for delusion. If, for example, the Christian God would reveal himself whenever his name was invoked, and his presence could be measured, recorded, and confirmed, well, that would be pretty compelling evidence. I don't consider it impossible that I may believe in divine beings at some point in the future. Empirical evidence may arise, or I may become mentally ill. Let's move on. Assuming you are not delusional, is citing evidence for any God possible? Or would citing any such evidence be invalidated as a God did it argument? And what does that say about the existence of a God, if anything at all?
I'm afraid this question makes very little sense as stated.
Mostly because it continues in the vein that belief in the divine must be based on a personal experience. But I'll give it my best, assuming I have a personal miraculous experience, and assuming I'm not delusional. I would seek to have the experience repeat under controlled conditions. If I couldn't, then I would assume I was delusional. Why wouldn't I make such an assumption? The question then asks if citing such evidence would be invalidated as a God did it argument. I'm assuming by referring to such evidence, Owchywawa is referring to other people's personal religious experiences. Delusional arguments are not God did it arguments, so I don't really understand what he's trying to ask here. If somebody has a seemingly miraculous experience, and they can't prove it, or repeat the experience in a controlled, monitored environment, then I'm going to assume they were delusional. A God did it argument is a different sort of argument altogether. That's where one assumes the agency of a divine being for a phenomenon which is readily observable, but for which the presence of a divine being is not at all in evidence. If one looks at a beautiful mountain range and says, God created this, that would be a God did it argument. There's no evidence he did. The existence of mountains isn't evidence of the divine any more than it is evidence of aliens. Regarding the last part of the question, what does that say about the existence of God? Well, not much, really, beyond the obvious. Existence can only be demonstrated empirically. Anecdotal and speculative stories are not a great way to accept the existence of anything, be it God or Santa Claus or pink unicorns or Britney Spears' musical talent. Question 3. Do you think it is best to be open-minded at all times, or do you think it is possible to be too open-minded? QualiaSoup has a wonderful video about open-mindedness that you should check out if you haven't already. A link in the description. Simply put, if by being open-minded you mean believing everything you are told, then yes, you can be too open-minded. Fortunately, open-minded is not synonymous with gullible, at least as far as I'm concerned. While I may be a skeptical person, I don't think being skeptical means that I am not open-minded. Being open-minded means being willing to consider an idea. It doesn't mean automatically accepting an idea. Most atheists I know are atheists precisely because they are willing to view the God hypothesis with an open mind. It would be nice if, for example, the average theist was willing to consider that they might actually be wrong and that there might not be any divine being at all. That would be a perfect example of being open-minded. Question 4. Do you agree with the following statement? Atheism is not a belief in the non-existence of God, but is the lack of belief in the existence of God. Yes, although the statement doesn't go far enough. I'd say atheism is the lack of belief in the existence of the supernatural, as opposed to specifically just the Christian God. There is some wiggle room here, given that there are multiple definitions of atheism given popular usage. Most people who consider themselves atheists that I know would probably agree that atheism is a lack of belief in the existence of the supernatural. Some, however, would say that atheism is necessarily the belief that there are no supernatural beings. This is sometimes referred to as strong atheism. But most atheists I've encountered simply tend to be people with evidentiary worldviews. They don't deny the possibility that magical beings exist, but they're going to assume such beings don't exist until there is evidence. Dawkins describes this as being a de facto atheist, but technically speaking, it's a flavor of agnosticism. I'd say a true agnostic would be someone who believes the possibility of the existence of the supernatural to be equivalent to the possibility of its non-existence, which is to say, a 50-50 proposition. De facto atheists don't see it as a 50-50 proposition. They tend to think that the likelihood that the supernatural exists is so vanishingly small that it's reasonable to assume non-existence, pending further evidence. Question number 5. Does God exist? And then, what does that make you, if not an atheist? Well, this is 2 questions. The answer to the first question, does God exist, is of course, I don't know. What does that make me? It makes me honest. It would be nice if theists could be similarly honest. A better question would be, do you believe God exists? To which my response would be, the existence of God is so unlikely, I think it is reasonable to assume he doesn't exist, pending further evidence.